Okay, so let's try and tackle bays and headlands. I've decided to kind of break this video down into 3 parts. First part will be looking at kind of concordant and discordant coastlines and how they alternate between hard and soft rock. Then, once we understood that, we can understand the formation of bays and headlands, headlands that protrude into our coastline, and the bays and beaches that form in between. Finally, we'll look at what happens to the headlands as they break down over time, how they move from a crack to a cave, an arch, a stack, and a stump. Okay, so we're basically going to zoom in to each 3 of these, and you just tune in to whichever part is most relevant. So let's do it. Okay, so let's look at concordant and discordant coastlines. So the coastline on the bottom is a concordant coastline. And I always think of concordant coastlines as being continuous. Continuous means uninterrupted, right? So there is a continuous layer of hard rock. The discordant coastline is a bit more all over the place. You might even say disorganized, okay? But it's not disorganized because what it is alternating between hard rock and soft rock. The key difference between hard and soft rock is their rate of erosion. So you need to really understand that rate of erosion is central here because that's what really defines the difference between hard rock and soft rock. One erodes quicker than the other, okay? So we have our coastline, we have our waves, there's wave attack, hydraulic action is taking place, and even though it's a hard rock with a slow rate of erosion, there is erosion taking place, okay? It may take hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years, but slowly our coastline is retreating and eroding backwards, okay? So what will then happen is that layer of hard rock will get thinner and thinner and thinner, okay? And eventually it will be breached. Now, once it's breached, the soft rock is now exposed, okay? So hydraulic action can now take place on soft rock, which will happen much, much faster. So what will happen is a cove will expand outwards, a cove. Yep. And what we see here on each side of the cove is going to be a cliff. Because there is that uniformed, very similar rate of erosion all along this coastline, you're going to have big steep cliffs, and then there'll be coves where it's punched through and is exposed the soft rock. So with concordant coastlines, the words you need are continuous, hard rock, rate of erosion, slow, but then you also need to do soft rock, exposed, and cove, okay? That is a concordant coastline. Now, we have our discordant coastline. So let's focus up here on our discordant coastline. So what happens is, I'm just gonna quickly rub this out. Go back to our old coastline, go back in time. Okay, so what's going to happen here with our discordant, so remember alternating is going to be a super, super important word. The wave attack is happening, there's erosion all along this coastline, yeah, but the rate of erosion will be fastest whether we see this exposed soft rock. So our coastline will suddenly dip in like so, and then we're left with a projecting headland. Because there is erosion here, so we can't say there's no erosion. It is being eroded, but it's at a much, much slower rate. There is erosion, but at a much, much slower rate. So what we see is the formation of a bay and a headland. And this is on a concordant coastline. I'm gonna do a little segue into bays and headlands now, and we'll go into that in more detail. Okay, so let's look further at bays and headlands. So here's another little diagram I've produced. Here's our headlands. Okay, now what we know about headlands is that they are hard rock. okay? So this is a vein or a band of hard rock, and it's alternating, right? So this is also hard rock, this is also a headland, this is also a headland, this is also hard rock. What's it alternating with? Well, we know this. It's alternating with soft rock. So this area here is soft rock, and this area here is soft rock, okay? Now remembering that our rate of erosion is central to this. These areas here in green are going to erode at a faster rate, okay? And you can see that's already taken place. Our coastline through hydraulic action and abrasion through wave attack has already caused our coastline to retreat. It's retreated faster, the rate of erosion, in these veins of soft rock. Now what's formed are bays. Bays are sandy beaches, so you should know from our unit on coasts and waves, if it's got a sandy beach, the swash must be more powerful than the backwash. And so what we see is a sandy beach forming, meaning these waves must be constructive, okay? And that's because it's so sheltered. You don't have those big, powerful waves because the headlands are actually providing shelter for the bays, okay? So, our headlands are formed of hard rock. You can see here. And there is erosion taking place. We mentioned it just previously. There is erosion here, and we'll talk about it in the next video, but it's much, much slower. And so they protrude. This word protrude is really important because the headlands protrude into the ocean whilst our bays retreat, okay? And that's pretty much the formation of bays and headlands. Very, very simple. I'll flash up the keywords that I think you need. But yeah, constructive waves, bay, erosion taking place, alternating hard rock, soft rock, hard rock, soft rock, hard rock. Alternating is a really important word here. All of this is found on a discordant coastline. Right, so what happens to these headlands once they've formed? So here is my headland. I hope that's obvious. It's a bit of a 3D image. Here is my bay. So we know that these waves are taking place. They're kind of relatively calm waves, so they're constructive. But despite being constructive waves, they are going to do some erosion. Now what happens is there is a weakness in the rock. Somewhere in this headland, there is a weakness, and the waves will find it. Hydraulic action will take place, a bit of abrasion will take place, and we start to see that the crack will expand and it will grow as it continues its breakdown. What then forms is a cave. So that crack will continue to be eroded. Over time it will get larger and larger, and then it will form a cave. The cave develops, it widens, and eventually, after the cave is deepened, it will then punch through, if you will. It will break through to form an arch. Now you can see through this. So I'm going to kind of draw the C on the other side here. Okay, and I'll get rid of this. Yep. It's now an arch. So you could kayak or you could swim through that arch. Erosion continues to take place. Once you have your arch, the arch will again widen. You also have this very heavy, unsupported rock. We know it's hard rock. Hard rock is more resistant to erosion. It's also heavier. Okay, it's unsupported, and as the arch gets bigger and bigger and bigger over time, as it widens, there's more and more rock that's unsupported. So you can kind of see what's going to happen here. What happens is it will collapse. The hard rock will collapse, and it will form a stack. Now this is a standalone arch. it's not connected to anything. It really is just a pillar stood out in the middle of the ocean. Okay, and if you ever see that, you can see, well, this is once a headland had existed. Again, it will erode over time, and a stack will become a stump. And this stump might be covered and submerged at high tide and then only exposed at low tide. But yeah, this is the end point, is the stump. So we have 5 stages here, okay? Crack, cave, arch, stack, stump. The cave is the the crack is the original weakness. It's developed over time into a cave. Eventually it breaks through the headland, which is protracting out into our ocean, and forms an arch. Over time, that arch will get bigger and bigger, unsupported, will form a stack as it collapses, and eventually that stack will form a stump. And then, what's going to happen is the whole process will repeat itself in a cycle, okay? And this explains why our coastlines are constantly shifting and constantly changing. Yep, bays are forming, headlands are forming, then at the same time they're being destroyed in uncertain parts, okay? So that kind of is the end of part 3 and ties together our concordant and discordant coastlines, our formation of bays and headlands, and then what happens to our headlands over time as they break down, because I know that they are hard rock, but they still are eroded, okay? Crack, cave, arch, stack, stump. All right, let's get stuck into an exam question from Geography B at Excel. If you're doing at Excel A or if you're doing AQA, it should still be really useful as there's loads of exam technique. So, here's the question. I'd encourage you to pause the video. What would you do if you got presented with this in an exam question? Okay? Right. Let's get stuck into it. So the first thing you would do is bug the question. Bit of a random exam question here. But the command word is examine. So that really means is use the resource to investigate, really. So we've got examine, then we're going to underline the key words: geology, physical processes, formation, coastal landforms. Okay? Personally, I think really it's geology, physical processes, coastal landforms. All right? Once you do that, it becomes a lot simpler and nicer question. I actually think this is a really nice question here. And then we have 8 markers, so we can talk about kind of having 2 paragraphs, but there's no spag to worry about. So here, again, I would get you to pause the video, take a second to read these resources, and think about how could you potentially use them in your exam. This one here is very much about the geology, and this is more about the kind of the almost human aspect of it. So, here is our mark scheme. Again, pause the video, have a read of it. But we see here, the ones I kind of drawn to when I was reading this were discordant and alternating bands. So I like that. Hard rock, soft rock, rate of erosion. Yeah, that's a nice paragraph I can write about. Okay, and it cocomes up again here in AO4 too. All right? So, I'm just going to zoom in to one of our 2 paragraphs, and this paragraph is going to be on discordant coastlines. Again, if you've seen previous videos, these connectives, they don't change because they allow us to evaluate at the beginning, they give us a clear point, they move us through the causes, the case study, the impacts, and the balance. Okay? So, it doesn't matter what the topic is, they will always provide you the skeleton and the structure you need to write a high-level answer, a high-level paragraph. Okay? So, let's get into this. One important factor is discordant coastlines. Done 2 things here. I've said a bit of evaluation, important factor. I could have said significant factor, but either way I've made a judgment. So I'm evaluating, which is high level. Discordant coastlines, that's my point. So everything I talk about from now on in this paragraph needs to be about discordant coastlines. Okay? Now, because I move into the causes here. Coasts are made from alternating bands of hard and soft rock are eroded at different rates. So I've talked about hard and soft rock, alternating bands, and differing rates of erosion. Okay, and I've done all of that in my first sentence, really. For example, Swanage, should have a capital letter, is home to one of the most famous headlands in the UK. and is over 500 metres long. I didn't even know Swanage had a headland, if I'm honest, but I used the map, the resource they gave me. I found out it was in Swanage. I have no idea if it's famous or not. And I found out using the scale that it was over 500 metres long. Okay? For me, that's showing the examiner I've engaged with the material and I've got my case study. This means that, so now I'm talking about the effects, the impacts. This means that different erosion rates shape the coast in alternating bays and headlands. As a result, bays often have sandy beaches, whilst headlands protrude out into the sea as they are made of hard rock. Again, how simple is that? You know, it's so easy to talk about bays, sandy beaches, headlands, protruding. However, physical processes such as wave action and coastal erosion can also play a significant role in shaping these landforms. So the shape of our headlands and our beaches are not just down to hard and soft rock, they're down to constructive and destructive waves. So I do add a little bit of kind of balance in there to show that I am a high-level geographer that understands the whole process. Yet, geology remains a very significant factor. So again, I end with evaluation as well. So start and end with evaluation. That's a really nice paragraph, and I hope you can see how the connectives and the use of our Tier 2 and Tier 3 words, our geographical language, how it allows us to build a paragraph that I think would score very well in a GCSE exam. Okay? I hope you found this useful. If you did, tune in next time for more videos.